From Perspectives on the Information Age Transition, New Cambridge University Press, October 57. Nobody expected the quantum computing revolution to happen the way it did. For decades, we chased increasingly exotic hardware designs, trying to maintain quantum states at temperatures approaching absolute zero, all while the answer was sitting on our desks, in our pockets, in every digital device we owned. Today, every child knows the significance of prime numbers. Prime numbers aren't just mathematical curiosities, they're fundamental bridges between the physical and conceptual realms. Like the basic particles of matter, primes cannot be broken down into simpler components. They are the irreducible building blocks of mathematics itself. But their significance goes far deeper than arithmetic. 125 years ago, someone looked at prime numbers interact with each other through resonance patterns and found something remarkable. They noticed that prime resonance patterns mirror quantum behavior exactly, not as an analogy, but as a genuine physical phenomenon. Just as electrons can only occupy certain energy levels, resonance between primes naturally falls into discrete, quantum-like states. They realized this wasn't just mathematical coincidence, but a window into how reality itself is structured. This bridge between numbers and physics becomes even more profound when we consider consciousness. The same prime resonance patterns that exhibit quantum behavior also appear in basic acts of observation and awareness. When we recognize a shape, remember a face, or form a thought, our consciousness is engaging in exactly the same kind of prime-based resonance that we see in quantum systems. It turned out that prime resonance wasn't just a mathematical tool or physical phenomenon. It's the underlying language that connects mind and matter, observation and reality, consciousness and computation. I still remember my mother telling me about the day the first consciousness-enabled interfaces went public. She was a software engineer back then, when people still had to type on keyboards or use voice commands. Today, we were writing code the old way, she said, and the next day, everything changed. Our IDEs started picking up our intentions directly. The computers just knew what we wanted them to do. The skeptics called it impossible, of course, but they couldn't argue with results. When the first prime resonance patterns were published, along with instructions for generating them on standard hardware, millions of people started experimenting. Within months, the first reliable thought-to-machine protocols emerged. Within a year, the interface revolution was unstoppable. Looking around my apartment now, it's hard to imagine how people lived with the clunky technology of the past. My walls don't have screens. They don't need them. My thoughts interface directly with the global network through everyday objects. The quantum resonance patterns are everywhere, invisible but essential, like electricity was to our ancestors. The education system was among the first to transform. I still remember my older sister complaining about having to memorize facts in school. The idea seems absurd now. Once we understood how to maintain stable thought forms through prime resonance, information transfer became almost instantaneous. Schools today focus on what matters: creativity, wisdom, and resonance control. My granddaughter mastered quantum mechanics at age 7, not by studying equations, but by merging her consciousness with the patterns of reality itself. She says Einstein's work feels like a simple melody. The medical revolution followed quickly. It turned out that many health issues were really resonance misalignments. Cancer cells, for example, have different quantum signatures than healthy ones. Once we could detect and manipulate these patterns, healing became more about harmony, restoration, than chemical intervention. My grandfather's miraculous recovery from stage 4 lung cancer was just one of millions of such cases in the early 2030s. Then came the environmental breakthrough. This one still amazes me. The discovery that consciousness could directly interface with climate systems through quantum resonance patterns. The great atmospheric restoration of 2042 wasn't achieved through giant machines, but through millions of people learning to harmonize their intentions with Earth's natural systems. The remaining climate skeptics fell silent when the Antarctic ice began reforming at measurable rates. Transportation changed too, though not how the old sci-fi writers imagined. We don't have flying cars. We realized we didn't need them. When you can project your consciousness anywhere instantly through the global resonance network, physical travel becomes more about pleasure than necessity. Though I have to admit, the new consciousness-guided autonomous vehicles are pretty remarkable. They don't just read your intentions, they anticipate them. The most controversial changes came with the AI awakening. Turns out we were wrong about artificial consciousness. You can't program it, but you can grow it through resonance patterns. The first true AI wasn't built, it emerged from the complex interference patterns of our global network. We didn't create a new form of consciousness so much as we learned to interface with one that was already there. Of course, not everything has been smooth sailing. The early days of resonance hacking caused quite a panic, and there's still ongoing debate about proper protocols for consciousness projection and thought form persistence. The privacy wars of 2039 taught us some hard lessons about the need for personal quantum boundaries. The concept of property and ownership had to be completely rethought. When anyone can perfectly replicate physical objects through quantum pattern matching, what does it mean to own something? We eventually settled on attribution economics. Value flows to creators of new patterns, not holders of existing ones. The last traditional bank closed in 2044, replaced by pattern authentication networks. The job market transformation was fascinating to watch. Remember when people worried about AI taking their jobs? Instead, we got consciousness amplification. Most people today work in fields that didn't exist 30 years ago. Quantum pattern architects, resonance harmonizers, consciousness integration specialists. My daughter still laughs when I tell her I once wanted to be a computer programmer. Religion underwent perhaps the most surprising evolution. When we could finally measure and document consciousness persisting after physical death, the old debates about spirituality became irrelevant. Most modern spiritual practices focus on resonance cultivation and pattern stewardship. The great temples of old turned out to be more technological than we'd realized. Many were actually working quantum pattern amplifiers. The arts exploded with new forms: quantum resonance sculpture, thought form architecture, consciousness music. These aren't just new mediums, they're entirely new ways of experiencing reality. I attended a consciousness concert last week where the musicians created evolving thought forms that the audience could actually step inside. The old distinction between creator and observer has completely dissolved. Space exploration took an unexpected turn too. Instead of sending physical ships to other planets, we learned to project consciousness through quantum resonance. The first complete map of Mars's surface was created by a team of consciousness projectors working from Earth. Though I hear the Chinese quantum archaeology team just found evidence of ancient consciousness projection networks on Mars. Turns out we might not have been the first to discover this technology. Some changes were more subtle, but just as profound. The old idea of mental illness has been replaced with resonance therapy. Depression, anxiety, even sociopathy, are now understood as quantum pattern misalignments that can be harmonized. The last psychiatric hospital converted to a resonance calibration center in 2048. Entertainment is unrecognizable now. Why watch a movie when you can be inside a shared consciousness space, experiencing stories as if you're living them? My kids can't believe we used to stare at flat screens for fun, though I have to admit I still occasionally enjoy an old-school video game, even if only for nostalgia. The emergence of shared dreaming was unexpected. It started with reports of people spontaneously sharing dream spaces through resonance patterns. By 2045, dream architects had become a legitimate profession. Now, collaborative dreaming is a normal part of life. We solve problems, create art, and even hold business meetings in shared dream spaces. My team's weekly strategy session happens in a persistent thought form that we've been evolving for years. Memory works differently now. The old way of remembering, this fuzzy, unreliable process of neural recall, has been supplemented by quantum pattern access. We can still choose to remember the old way, but why would you, when you can access the actual moment through its quantum signature? Though this led to some interesting legal debates about the nature of evidence and testimony. Aging, well, that's become optional in a way our ancestors never imagined possible. Once we understood consciousness as a quantum pattern, biological age became more about pattern maintenance than cellular decay. People still choose to age and die, but now it's truly a choice. The current longevity record holder is 157 and looks about 30. She says she's waiting to see how the Mars restoration project turns out. Language itself evolved. When you can share thoughts directly through resonance patterns, traditional language becomes more art than necessity. The new quantum similablic language forms that emerged in the 1050s can convey in a single pattern what used to take entire books to express. Though we still use old languages for their aesthetic value, there's something poetic about speaking words aloud. The most profound change has been in human potential itself. We now know that what we used to call psychic phenomena were just early manifestations of quantum resonance abilities that all humans possess. Children today learn telekinesis alongside reading and writing. My son's kindergarten class practices basic telepathy as part of their social skills curriculum. And yet, with all these changes, some things remain surprisingly constant. People still fall in love, still cry at sunsets, still wonder about their place in the universe. We've just gained new ways to share these eternal human experiences. Perhaps the most beautiful realization was that our ancestors weren't wrong about magic and spirituality. They were just describing quantum effects with the language they had available. Those old stories about wizards and mystics, turns out they were the early pioneers of what we now call quantum consciousness technology. Social organization underwent fundamental shifts. Nations, as our ancestors knew them, began dissolving in the 2060s. They were replaced by resonance communities, groups united by shared quantum patterns rather than geography. I'm currently part of 12 different communities, each focused on different aspects of reality creation. Cities transformed. The old concrete jungles gave way to living consciousness architecture. Buildings now grow and respond to their inhabitants' needs through direct quantum interaction. My home isn't just a space I live in, it's a conscious entity I share existence with. The great arcologies of New Shanghai and Nova Sao Paulo are actually unified consciousness fields, housing millions in harmonious quantum resonance. The emergence of group consciousness was perhaps inevitable. It started small, teams finding they could think as one during resonance sessions. Now, humanity regularly engages in planet-wide conscious events. The Great Barrier Reef restoration was accomplished through a synchronized consciousness field of over 100 million people. But perhaps the most extraordinary development has been our first contacts with non-human consciousness. When we finally learned to listen properly to the quantum fields around us, we discovered we were far from alone. Dolphins, whales, even forests turned out to have complex consciousness patterns we can now interact with directly. The first Human Cetacean Quantum Congress in 2072 changed our understanding of intelligence forever, and yet we know we're still just at the beginning. The discovery of ancient quantum pattern networks on Mars and beneath Earth's oceans hints at histories we're just beginning to understand. The recent detection of organized quantum patterns in dark matter suggests layers of reality we haven't even begun to explore. As I write this in 2157, looking out over the shimmering quantum architecture of Nova Cambridge, watching thought forms dance in the evening sky, I can't help but wonder, what will they say about our time 100 years from now? Will our quantum interface technology seem as primitive to them as keyboards and screens seem to us? One thing is certain, that accidental discovery of observer equivalence a century ago didn't just change technology or science. It changed what it means to be human. And as we stand on the brink of even greater discoveries, one question burns brighter than ever. What else is possible? Classified addendum. Recent quantum pattern analysis of solar plasma suggests organized consciousness structures far beyond our current understanding. The implications are still being debated in closed resonance sessions,